Let's call this work session order. This should be the work session on 2017-91F. So let's go around the identifiers of the record. Bill, we'll start with you.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, before we begin, there's two ordinances scheduled for today's work session, the second of which is a quick rezone. We'd like to request flipping the order and deal with the rezone first.
So you're going to do with 90 first, then 91?
Please.
Okay. Everybody get a copy of 90? I do. You done? Okay, we'll do 90 first, then 91.
Thank you.
Bill, you want to identify yourself for the tape, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill Pop, President and CEO, Anchorage Economic Development Corporation.
Robin Ward, Director of Real Estate and Chief Housing Officer.
Mark Lewis, Alaska Pacific.
Tom Livingston, architect.
Chris Sherry, Director of Office Economic and Community Development.
Francis McLaughlin, Current Planning Division.
Barbara Jones, municipal clerk.
And the attorney for the people.
Attorney for Alaska Development Group.
Okay. Let's see.
I'm King Assistant Council. Pete Peterson, Assembly. Forrest Dunbar, Assembly.
Dick Training, Assembly.
John Middleton. Christopher Constrin.
Felix Rivera.
Okay. Mr. Schutte. So,
Great, thank you. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this rezone. I'm going to turn it over to Francis McLaughlin, our current planning technician, who's the expert in this matter.
Yeah, so there's a rezone at the next assembly meeting. It's a straightforward rezone. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval. UAA is rezoning one of their properties from B3 SL.
Mark, the laydown yard.
Yeah, well, it's already allowed under its current zoning, but their other properties are zoned PLI, public lands and institutions, and they want this property which they own to match their other the zoning of the other properties that they own. And the laydown yard is a temporary sort of strategy to deal with development projects that are occurring on campus. The long-term goal is a future office building in support of the university. So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval, and the department recommends approval of this.
With the community council, I went to, they recommended approval too, so that's no problem with you personally. Question from assembly members. Okay, thank you, Francis.
Thank you.
Be in front of us on Tuesday. Okay, now for the main one.
Great, thank you. We are getting it up on the screen momentarily.
We've been joined by, how are you, sir? Identify yourself for the record.
Eric Croft.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I'm going to stand up. I don't like talking sitting down. So, as I mentioned, I'm Chris Schutte. I'm the Director of the Office of Economic and Community Development. We're going to walk you through AO 2017-91S today, which is a proposed development deal, phase one of a proposed development deal for the Tudor Road campus, which we're not supposed to call a campus according to UAA, so we're calling it the Tudor Road compound, which doesn't really sound better. And the downtown Department of Health and Human Services building. Real quick before I begin, there are a few key partners in this project that are in the audience, and since we didn't do audience introductions, I'd like to call out. We have Curtis McQueen from Slipknot Inc., Tim Potter from Dow, James Doherty from RIM Architects, Brett and Steve from AWWU, Abul Hassan from Public Transit, Hal from Planning, Melinda from DHHS, we're building her a new building, and I might have missed some people I can't see, but there's a lot of us here that are involved in this project. So real quick, Robin and I are going to go over the genesis of how we got to this point today. Then we're going to turn it over to the project developers to go through the proposal. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Pop for the economic analysis portion. And then lastly, Robin and I will wrap up with some specifics about the ordinance today. Feel free to interject with questions, please.
Chris, I want them to wait till you're done, then we'll ask questions.
Oh, okay.
But as to whether we call it campus or not, UA is on the other side of the street. So on the other side of the street, you can call it whatever you want.
All right, fair enough. I like campus better. All right, so how did we get here today? Well, about over a year ago exactly, almost to the day, wow. We issued a request for proposals, and yes, request for proposals asked for only two simple things, at least I thought in my head, two simple things. Number one, we asked for fee simple acquisition of a new building for the Department of Health and Human Services between 38 and 42,000 square feet. And it had to be fee simple, meaning that the city needed to own the structure. We weren't looking for a lease. We weren't looking for a build to suit and pay it off later. We wanted a building. And then secondly, we required that the proposer offer up a redevelopment plan for the current DHHS facility at the corner of 9th Avenue and L Street. And it was a relatively simple and open-ended RFP, if you will, and had a lengthy section of specifications laid out by DHHS, which, thank you, Melinda. It was a 14-page RFP, and I think 10 of those pages were your specifications. So it was very specific to their needs, but very broad in how to get there. We had 2 proposals received, and we met with both of those proposers because they each had really good proposals in different ways. We had one proposer who was very strong on how to provide a new DHHS and then sort of weak on what to do with the old one. And then vice versa, we had a proposer who had a wonderful plan for the redevelopment project, but sort of not such a great answer on how to do DHHS. So Robin, matchmaker that she is, introduced these 2 parties in a city hall room, explained why they were meeting, closed the doors, left them alone for an hour and said, figure it out. Well, an hour later, they came out, they were best friends, they had entered into a new joint venture, and it looked like they would be able to leverage the strongest aspects of each proposer's original proposal into a new combined joint venture, which brings us to where we are today. So before they get up and talk about the pictures, just give you a rough overview of what you're going to hear about today. There are 2 sites that we're talking about. One is at Tudor and Elmore. The other is just down the street at 9th Avenue and L Street. The projects they're going to describe have many different features, mixed-use features at both sites, and they're going to go into greater details on both. And for that, I'll introduce and turn it over to both Tom Livingston and Mark Lewis from Civic Development Group.
Afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here. I want to tell you that my partner, David Irwin, and you can see that we were, Robin kind of engaged us and then we got married, I guess is the way that story goes. I represent him also here today. He's off on some family business. But we're very pleased to be here, and I'd like to just take 2 seconds to kind of reintroduce our team a little bit, because they've been very important to our process of getting here, and you know, to be frank with you, I'm just doggone proud of them. Our contractor is Eklutna Construction, and Curtis is here to answer any questions about the construction part of it. Our lead architect is Livingston Stone. Tom Livingston is here. The rim architect is our architect for the actual new DHHS building, which is principally designed and ready to go. Engineer is Dahl Engineering. Tim Potter's here. Tim has some more history, kind of, and more understanding of the engineering aspects of the planning aspects of the community. Not here is our leasing agent, Carl Kuhn, and then our attorney, Janet Wallstein's here. So as we take a look at this project, there's kind of a concept that is good to kind of keep in mind. What we're doing in basis is trading land and some other incentives to build a new DHHS building. It's a swap, and that's the underlying basis for the deal. So this is the campus site. I like the word campus. Better than complex. And you can see it's right there on Tudor and Elmore. And I need to kind of point out that those intersections, kind of key points of. So you can see the grocery store, in which I'm happy to say that we've got a national commitment on that store. And then it's truly a mixed-use project, to kind of what we like to call a fully integrated mixed-use project. So we've got about 200 residential units that are built above and behind the grocery store, along with some condominiums that we'll point out in a minute. And a hotel, and we think there's a niche for that hotel because of the UMed district and how it's uniquely positioned there. 2 office buildings, and then the relocated bus facility for the school, and then the DHHS building, which we'll get another chance to take a look at.
Nobody go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So this would be, and that was the rendering. Here's the site plan for the project, and you can see how it lays out in a site plan. It's carefully designed so that there's some internal circulation, so that it doesn't unnecessarily bleed onto Tudor and Elmore. Next. Next slide. There you go. Now their architectural rendering. This is looking, I guess, would be north west, and you can see the kind of the build out, the couple of the pad restaurant buildings, then the grocery store, and then you're getting a glimpse of the hotel and the 3 residential toward the southeast. Yeah, that's correct. Next slide. So this is the back side, what I call the back side of the apartments. And you see from the ground up, you'll see 2-story condominiums. And they'll be really interesting. They'll be walk-ups, and you'll have really interesting aspect. And then the rental residential units above.
This is a view as if you were in the parking lot at the permit center.
So parking is fit in between and underneath those buildings. So there's a 2-story parking structure that's not readily visible there. And it accommodates all of the residential units and all the residential parking. Next slide. So this is our rendering of the new DHHS building. It's a beautiful building. We'll have solar on top of it. 40,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet a floor. And it was specifically and carefully designed in conjunction with the department. And they had not only, as was mentioned earlier, the 10-page requirements, but we met very carefully with them all. And I think that they're quite happy with the result that has come about. This replacement of the DHHS building, I know and you know, has been a goal of the MOA for a long, long time. So we're really pleased and happy to be a part of that solution. Next slide. This is a site plan. It gives you a chance to see some of the landscaping and how the building fits into the site as a whole. So here's first floor of the DHHS building. And as I mentioned earlier, it fits very well with their plans and uniquely designed. And so it's really a single purpose building. It's really built for them, designed for them. Next page. There's the second floor. You get an idea of some of the training rooms and unique features of the building. So here's the replacement building. And when we interviewed Tom's firm for architects for this building, one of the things that really impressed us was that they had won a national award in Alaska for designing and a senior housing project. And so they brought with it a tremendous amount of experience and understanding of the unique needs of that population. And so that building, this is 120 units. The exact unit mix may vary. It may be, and the number may vary depending on the mix. But it's also a mixed-use project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I would like Tom to get up and say just a few words about how some of the unique features of the building in just a minute when I get to the next slide. So the next slide. So some of the unique features and some of the interesting things, it's going to have some retail on the ground floor, including a cafe. We've been talking to a small pharmacy, a couple of boutiques, hair salon. It also has some demo space and comments, a fitness room, some offices so that service providers can provide service to seniors, which will be kind of unique. We're planning on hosting everything from, during tax time, having a tax person in there and doing all sorts of other interesting things that'll help seniors move on. So cars, we're going to try something a little unique. We're going to do zip cars. I don't know if you know what zip cars are, but zip cars are kind of a unique idea that seniors can check out a car with your credit card and have it for a few hours, do the things they need to do, and then bring back the car and check it in. So a lot of seniors don't necessarily, they might want to have a car all the time, but don't really need one. And we're kind of hoping that we kind of encourage this transition away from that. So Tom, maybe you could talk just a little bit about.
Sure, yeah, some of the sort of the olive colored areas you see on our community spaces for the residents. There's a fitness center, there's a community meeting space, there'll be crafts and arts room. Mark mentioned the little business center. The kind of lime green is retail and commercial spaces. We have in the lower right corner there'll be a garden that'll be, again, for residents, there'll be a secure area. There'll be also an outdoor plaza off of the drive-up area toward the left there. At each end of the building, we have rooftop gardens also. There's one that overlooks the park strip, which is to the right of this slide. And then over on the left, a little bit lower, there's a rooftop garden over some apartments and over the Bistro Cafe area. We also have on the site plan, sorry, back and forth. To the left of this slide is a HLB property that will be available for parking, about 50 car parks. For folks that do have cars, they can park them there. Some of the features that we try to build into this are things that are specific to seniors and also specific to cold weather regions like Anchorage. To have a walking path within the building, so folks don't have to go to the mall to walk. They can actually walk in this building. If we go down the boulevard, we'll have windows at each end of the hallway. They can go down the stairwells. The stairwells will have windows in them. They'll have a bench, so if you only make half a flight at a time, you can take a rest. And each floor will also have a living area, what we call living room, greenhouse area. That will look out to the west. That's a common space. There'll be a couple of elevators, an elevator lobby, and there's a lot of other sort of minor features that will be built into this that we've learned in designing senior facilities.
Sure. Then, Bill. Okay.
You up?
All right. Once again, I'm Bill Popp. I'm President and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. For the record, Mr. Chair, I'm here today to speak to an economic impacts analysis that AEDC performed on this project at the request of the Office of Community and Economic Development. AEDC, using a proprietary software known as JobsEQ, which is a national standard in the economic development world, being used in hundreds of communities and regions across the United States to analyze economic impacts of proposed projects like this one. We went through and looked at basically three different metrics that then created three different outcomes. Direct employment, which then was used to calculate indirect employment and induced employment in the community, as well as the direct output from this project that would include total annual revenue from the project and factoring in wages, materials, overhead, and profit. And then from that direct output, the indirect output that would be generated by that, as well as the induced dollars circulating in the economy as a result of this project. In going through this, just in simple overview, 521 jobs would be created during the construction of this project, with a value to the community and economic activity of just over $80 million during the total construction of all phases. And that's 350 direct jobs, 171 indirect and induced jobs that would be created by this project, for a total of $67 million worth of economic impact from the ongoing business side of the equation, and 617 total jobs that would be created once the project was up and running under the configuration described by the project developers. We use direct employment numbers provided by the project developer and then use that to input into our modeling software, which then generated the indirect and induced jobs and economic output. So all told, this project, based on our estimations, would create 1,138 direct and indirect and induced jobs in the economy, and then $147 million and change in terms of economic activity. I do want to point out that the economic impact from the ongoing businesses, the dollar figure quoted at $67 million, is for 1 year's worth of activity. So, you know, the project has a multiple year life expectancy. We didn't want to project beyond that. We'll leave that to those who are assessing the overall project to take a look at that and decide what they would think. But if you think about it in terms of a 5-year project, that's a little over $300 million worth of economic activity in our $24 billion economy, in terms of the way things stand right now in the Anchorage economy. So overall, the project does appear to have some fairly significant job and economic impacts in the community. And just as a collateral note, we did distribute today to all members of the Assembly a update on the economic profile of Anchorage. That's a document that was handed out at the beginning of the meeting. If you want a little bit of context in terms of what's going on in the economy and how this would potentially fit, we were hoping that that document might provide you a little color around the numbers.
Okay, and just before we move into questions, we'll move on to the last section of our presentation today, and this is just to briefly go through, remember what the ordinance is asking from you now that we've talked about economic impact and looked at some really amazing pictures. So in essence, the first section of this ordinance is just asking for authorization for the MOA to enter into a development agreement with DHHS. One, which is the name of the LLC created by the joint venture partnership here for this project. Section 2 and 3 both deal with modifications to Title 21 that we are requesting. Section 2 specifically is asking for a waiver from the public facility site selection process. Normally, a public facility like this must go through a site selection process to determine the ideal location for that public facility. Those of you that have been around know that the DHHS building has been through 3 separate public facility site selection processes over the past 13 years, I think it is. And all 3 of those have indicated that this location is a suitable location for that structure. We are asking for a waiver from that in this case because those 3 previous all say the same thing, that this is a good location. And also because these things cost money and take time, and to be honest, we think that there are 3 perfectly good prior public facility site selection studies to rely on. Section 3 is asking for a substitution of an administrative site plan review for the DHHS building itself. So Title 21 requires public facilities or public buildings to go through a major site plan review when they are constructed. The reason we're asking for this substitution is because the entire Tudor Road campus, which I'm comfortable saying now, does have to go through a major site plan review. And it seemed duplicative to do a major site plan review for the entire area and then subject a single building to the same process. Additionally, because the phasing is such where the grocery store is going to go first, the major site plan review will have to happen prior to construction of a DHHS structure. So we felt it was duplicative or superfluous, and we asked that it be substituted with an admin site plan review. Section 4 and 5, these are both of the authorizations to dispose of municipal property. As Mr. Lewis indicated in the beginning, one of the components of this transaction is to contribute municipal land into the deals. These are parcels that have been municipally owned for a long time, have never been taxed, and currently generate no property tax revenue. Through this transaction, all of those parcels will now be revenue-generating parcels. Section 6 is simply a requirement that the developer has to fulfill the terms of the development agreement before any land is transferred. So it's a protection for the municipality. And lastly, Section 7, because we like things to happen in a timely fashion, we've set a due date of March 1st, 2018 for the development agreement to be executed. Should that not occur, all provisions of this ordinance would be null and void. And that is a summary of the ordinance that wraps up the work session. If somebody could flip the lights, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I do want you to send a copy of all the things that we've got, CD to the clerk, take make distribution to the assembly members, because we'll need to see what you've got. Chris, I'm going to start with you first, sir.
I have a few questions.
First, I suggest that you put together in your site plan map for the downtown building a picture of where the parking's at, because that's the number one question I've already received from folks in the downtown, waiting where you park people. I'm just for the record in support of the concept of the project, but I do have some questions, so don't take them. Yeah, well, they did say 50 spots on the Heritage Land Bank property right next door, and it's kind of where the K Street Eats project is, and.
Mr. Chairman, to correct that, it's actually across 8th Avenue from it. It's not the K Street East property.
Okay, so nearby.
Go ahead, John, I'll come back to you on this.
Just to follow up on the parking side, too, so is that, will that property be kind of part of the dealer, that's your required parking?
It would most likely be leased. Those are 3 HLB parcels that today are used for employee parking for the DHHS employees.
So
It's used for parking today.
So on the site that we saw, there's not enough parking to meet requirements, so they would be required to lease something nearby, probably this.
Well, Mr. Weddleton, there's no requirement for parking in downtown.
There's none at all even for residential.
But functionally, we know that there's going to be employees, management employees, and certain tenants that will require some parking.
And of course, that's where you're going to be.
Yep.
Not done.
Chris, back to you.
Thank you. So just show that somewhere in your material so that people can have some comments. It'll give me something to push back. We talked about the economic impact here, and what I'm interested in is that kind of next level down. We're sacrificing a job function in the downtown, which is the Health and Social Services building. And Mr. Schutte and I talked at length that there was some time, a drive to keep all these buildings and businesses in the downtown so the downtown stays vibrant and we don't bleed off kind of the economic engine of our downtown. And so has the analysis been done of the 617 jobs and $67.3 million of economic impact in the long term relative to each site broken down? So the downtown will see this development, the numbers, and the rest of this.
I assume that's pointed at me. Through the chair, Mr. Chair, there was a memo that should have been distributed that breaks down each and every single development in terms of its direct, indirect, and induced jobs. We did provide that to the Office of Community and Economic Development, and it's my understanding that this memo was distributed as part of the briefing packet for this project.
Yep. And so can you just kind of outline it?
If I may, it'll take me a moment to find that specific section because it's broken up in 2 parts. Are you interested in more in the operational side of things, I assume?
Yeah, the
Okay.
short-term construction, but really what happens in the downtown and these things that we're trying to do. But if I have another question, we can come back to that.
Okay.
Actually, Mr. Weddleton, or I'm sorry, Mr. Constant, through the chair, I can answer that. So you'll have 118 potentially residents who are economic engines of their own, and actually were not part of the economic analysis done by AEDC. It's Appendix D in your packets. The on-site management jobs, if I recall, Bill, it's on the 3rd page, is 16.
In looking at, it's actually on page 6. In looking at the 825 L Street housing complex for the construction and for the operation, let's see. Forgive me, I should have had this more broken down. 6, 8, 10. Yes. It appears to be 18, yes.
And so last on that line, I'll be done. So what's the net shift of jobs from, do we know, from the HHS downtown to in town?
It's not that far away.
Yeah. Do we know?
Melinda?
The current number of employees we have are about 108.
Okay. That's a little disconcerting, but I'll read through the materials we have and I'll have them.
Mr. Chair, if I may just follow up on that. One of the things that is lacking in downtown is permanent year-round residence. And permanent year-round residence is a key to any kind of downtown revitalization and growth of additional jobs downtown. As long as we have a commuter model for downtown, we're going to be very constrained in terms of meaningful jobs in the downtown core that are going to be valuable to the long-term health and growth of downtown.
And I I could see that, and I could also see that seniors who are coming to retirement and ending their life probably aren't really job
Ending your life.
generators. That's
Wow.
usually senior housing is on the way. It's in our, okay, last question.
You get there.
Last question. So, this is more of a process question, so I understand what's going to come forward over the next several months. At what points does the Assembly have input on this process after today?
To the Chair, Mr. Constant, the Assembly has to approve, obviously, the terms of the tax abatement per 1230 AFC 1235. The tax abatement application from this applicant is currently in the CFO's office for analysis. He's actually out of town this week, so I don't have an idea of when that will be completed, but it's supposed to be before the end of July.
He has 90 days for the date of the submission.
That's correct, and I
So
believe
we're right
since
in that time frame.
for the data, based on the date of submission, he has to have something done by the end of July. The recommendations of the CFO, as once approved by the mayor, come back to the body in the form of an AO. So you will have to consider that recommendation at a later date. I can't tell you exactly when, but at some point in the near future.
Is that the only other?
Does how hard I'm looking here, does the major site plan review go to them? I don't think so. Oh, there will be a rezone, and the rezone of the Tudor Road property will go from Planning and Zoning Commission to you guys. So again, you'll touch it at that point. Robin, am I missing anything?
No, those are the only two that I know of.
Anything else, Chris, before I go on? John?
Yeah, a couple. One, I was on the planning commission when we said no keep DHHS downtown, kind of following 2020. But I kind of understand this. Now then they've sat still in that same building for all these years, and this does bring the housing downtown. So I'm kind of all right, letting that go. Looking at the bigger picture, so looking at the original RFP, the idea seemed to be, okay, you get this really valuable downtown property and go build us a DHHS building somewhere, okay? And what it's come into is you get this valuable downtown property and you build a DHHS building and you also get a huge amount of other stuff. So the price went up substantially as far as kind of that picture. I mean, maybe that's where it has to land, but it seems like the price went up.
Mr. Welton, through the chair, Ms. Welton, the DHHS RFP specifically recognized that there would need to be other resources brought to bear, and it specifically singled out municipal surplus property as one avenue for closing that gap in the actual RFP document. So it's always been understood that to accomplish the RFP, there would have to be some sort of investment on the city's part, and money wasn't an option, but land is. And so it's always been envisioned that there would be some sort of transfer or transaction like that.
Okay, thanks. So I drove by the site there today just to see what was there. And you're looking at, you got the buses there, and then you told me earlier that the motorcycle training will be taken care of. We have a motorcycle caucus on the assembly, that's very concerned about this. So, but looking at the bus thing, it looks very clean and neat here, but there's on that, where the buses are now, there's a couple buildings where they do maintenance, there's fuel tanks there, they store a lot of stuff. And so I wonder, okay, where did those go? And then also you've got, one you have, I mean, it's been a problem, the fumes, when they warm up, and we haven't really cured that here. And, you look at this chain link fence with barbed wire, which is probably there for a good reason. So that seems very incompatible. The fumes of barbed wire, plus it's so much smaller, very incompatible with all this other really pretty stuff we're doing. Does this increase ASD's cost because they need to store their stuff and so on somewhere else? What's the plan? And I think someone said that it won't be there forever. If not forever, where does it go eventually?
Through the chair, Mr. Welton, that's a very long answer to give, but I'll do my best to keep it within the time limit. So we have Abul Hassan from Public Transit who can speak to the specifics of the transaction in greater detail, but in essence, it is we will be doing two things. We'll be co-locating a portion of the current ASD functions with public transit to take advantage of the amenities of that campus on the southwest corner of the Tudor Road complex, and moving the true outdoor storage of school buses from its current location to the western corner. Is the barbed wire fence incompatible with the surrounding uses? Well, it's required by ASD, and certainly isn't pretty, but it is required, and I think will still fit within the spaces. Long-term, there is a vision that Abul can speak to of a fully integrated, collaborative project between ASD and public transit that will alleviate several of the concerns that you just listed, Abul.
Certainly. So in the diagram that you saw, all you're taking a look at is where the placement of the 120-some 40-foot vehicles go. You're correct. It does not show where the fuel tank would go, where the maintenance facility goes, where the office goes. We are engaging in conversations with AST to mutually facilitate sort of what the needs aspect is with AST to the sufficiency of bringing them into our public transportation campus. If all of this succeeds, there is also a possibility, and again, this is a little tricky because the difference is, on our campus, the land is owned municipally, the facilities are all federally owned. So, what the conversation in relation to ASD is not a conversation that requires municipal approval, it actually requires federal approval. And that's the conversation that I'm having on the back end with our Region 10 and DC. They're willing to sort of enable me to continue to facilitate these conversations, but you asked about cost. There is a cost associated because federally no one gives up anything for free, so there's always a cost associated. We're discussing that with ASD right now. And in the long run, if all of this pans out, if I'm able to sort of pull it off and federally they approve, there is a possibility if this could be turned into sort of a multimodal concept, that even the ASD fleet might have a roof over its head, much like our internal warm storage bus barn does. This is a big if, though, and there's a lot of finessing that my department has to do on the back end and conversing with the FDA to be able to facilitate that. And that would be federal money utilized to do this, which would also mean that the structure is federally owned. Yeah.
So, can you give me an idea how many dollars, this will cost? We've been cutting your budget routinely, so if this becomes a more burden to you, you're already kind of close to doing this new rollout. What's the dollars there, and then what's the dollars to ASD? Do they know what's coming at them?
Yeah. Absolutely. So when we began this project, of course, you saw the cost of the project itself. The costs that weren't shared is that if you take a replica of what the ASD structures are right now, and you try to duplicate that in today's real-world dollar terms, we're talking about a $25 million problem. The developer's presumption on that cost was $6 million. Of course, there was a net difference there between the two amounts. My conversation in this and public transportation is for us to see if we can leverage and cooperate with ASD to have a holistic solution to transportation, leveraging federal money and federal assets, and utilizing the $6 million that the developer set aside to engage in all of this. The greatest yield of that $6 million is if I can leverage it 80-20. So the 20% would be the $6 million, 80% would be federal dollars. And not all of that $6 million will be able to be used in that capacity. But the more that I can save with that $6 million for that purpose, the greater the benefit to public transportation and ASD.
All right, thank you.
Forrest?
I have a separate question. Before we leave John's question, I think this is an interesting line of inquiry. If we fail to get those federal funds, or does the whole project fall apart?
So two things. Obviously, it's sort of in my mind, it's a phased approach. There needs to be concurrence and approval from ASD's side. If they're not happy, obviously that's an issue. So we're working that through. So in the short term, at a very minimum, ASD would have to agree and the FDA would have to buy off on the dollar term of what the least cost is of the federal facility. If that can be done, then all of this is fine. At a minimum, what it would be is sort of a guarantee of whatever the status is of the pavement and the location where the 120 vehicles go. Electrical hookups, awnings, exactly a replica of what they have right now, and whatever the varying level is. In in concept, what I have is between now and 2020, something that would allow for the feasibility of the operations without a deficiency to ASD. And maybe even sort of a promissory note that says that past 2020, if I'm not able to line up the federal grants for that aspect to get the additional bus barn roof over ASD's fleet, then we make them whole, utilizing the $6 million that the developer set aside.
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, one way to look at it is no. That if the roof, the federally funded, all-encompassing roof project does not happen, does that stop this deal, this transaction? The answer is no.
Right.
So can I, go ahead, Chairman, thank you. So the question I was going to ask before we got on that, I think a very important tangent. Mr. Constant was talking about the impact on downtown. I don't want the narrative to get out of the barn that this is a drain on downtown, because I don't really see it that way. Both because of the permanent housing that you mentioned, which I think will bring a lot of jobs, but also because I believe there's retail. This is a mixed-use project. So you're talking about the 18 jobs. That's 18 jobs specifically to the senior housing, right? And so that doesn't include any other retail jobs that might be in that space.
It does.
Is that right?
No, that's not correct. I believe the 18 jobs do cover.
It does cover that.
Yeah, we have 6 jobs from the pharmacy, and then a couple of jobs each for the retail spaces, and these are conservative numbers, okay? That was one of the things that we specifically requested of the developers. Don't give us pie-in-the-sky numbers. Give us reasonable minimum jobs that would be created by the different businesses that you see being created.
Okay. Well, that's certainly more of a concern for you than Mr. Constant, but I still see it as not the drain that some people might portray it as. And and I hope you'll agree with me as we go forward. The pharmacy, I think, that was one of the few things that actually had decisions come to me and talk to me about, that they were really eager. Even people who live in East Anchorage were eager to see a pharmacy come downtown. And one of the reasons that they pointed out was because a lot of tourists that come downtown need, they run out of their prescription, or they lose their prescription or whatever, and they want to fill it, and there's just nowhere around here to walk and do that. And so that was something that they were excited about. So I hope that does go forward.
Yes.
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I saw the presentation here a week or so ago the first time, I thought we were talking about the tax abatement was planning to be used to help finance the rebuilding of the DHHS building. I didn't know if that was mentioned in the presentation today or not, but I wanted to make sure that people, that the members were aware of that.
Through the chair, Mr. Peterson, that's correct. We didn't go into that detail today, but the cost of building the new DHHS building for the municipality, the tax abatement terms that they have applied for, should they receive them, that will, in essence, help pay for a portion of that building, as will the value of the land being contributed to the transaction. Basically, it's credit. We'll sell $9 million worth of land in credit towards building a $14.5 million building for DHHS.
Okay. Anything else? One additional thing. And also when we had that presentation, the idea came up that you might want to put a small medical clinic, a dock in the box, so to speak, in this facility, and I just wanted to throw that out there. So that's on the potential list of things to do.
Absolutely. Just a moment on the tax question. This is really kind of a unique use of tax abatement. The abatement really doesn't come to the use for the developer. It goes really directly into the construction of the new building for DHHS. So it's kind of a whole nother concept by which you are able to take private tax abatement and turn it into public facilities.
Yeah, I thought that was a unique aspect when I saw the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Eric, any questions? Felix, any questions? Coming back, Chris?
Yeah, just one last note. I have not bought the idea that this doesn't have a drain on the downtown. I haven't seen an argument that doesn't say that, but for the greater good of our community, the fact that there's a food desert that could be resolved and we could provide something that's essential to a neighborhood that doesn't have it, I think that most folks in the downtown would recognize that there is something in this for the downtown and that it's worthy. I just know that there's gonna be some hard conversations.
There always are. Another question?
So we are waiving the site plan review for the DHHS building, but there will be a master plan for the whole thing, including where that is, that's correct?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, it's the difference between what's known as a major site plan review and an administrative just for that building.
That's right, so we're waiving the major one, so. But, so if you have a master site plan, I didn't know you had to have one just for that building, why would you, doesn't that already cover it? We do site, like at UMed, they have a master plan, we do site plans for each building.
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, it's not a master plan, it's a major site plan review. And the only reason that the public facility would be required to do a duplicative one is because that's how the code is written, that all public buildings are required to go through a major site plan review.
Because it's a public building.
Yes.
So,
The situation was not envisioned where it would be part of a larger campus.
right, okay, so that makes sense.
Good.
So, do you expect, so an administrative site plan could, if you wanted a variance on any kind of thing, would that be able, Al could give a variance?
Through the chair, Mr. Wilson, it wouldn't be a variance, but in looking at and reviewing the site plan proposed for the DHHS site, it would be reviewed internally by staff and signed off on by staff. But if there's an issue of a variance of any kind, obviously it has to go through a different process. One of the challenges in this site at Tudor and Elmore that we didn't put up because it's hard to look at is a view of the site and all of the existing easements on the properties. And one of the biggest and most challenging to work with is, according to the designers, is the 30-foot easement that runs right along Tudor Road. So meaning you can't put any building any closer to Tudor Road than they are proposing currently.
Okay, so you don't expect any big variances, so.
Through the chair, Mr. Wilson, no.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Member? Go ahead.
Yeah.
We have 8 minutes. We have to tell you, actually, we have 2 minutes.
Okay, this will be just.
If I tell you 8, it'll be all gone.
No, it's just be, and I think you guys are aware, you have this idea that you're building a campus across from the campuses, and you'll have people living there going back and forth across 8 lanes of busy traffic, and they're really, I mean, you have that bridge on the other side, but
There's an
that's
intersection there.
longer than people will walk, and you cross over to where there's no sidewalk, so we really don't have a connection between the two campuses, and that's not taken care of here, but at some point, you know, we'll build $1 million sky bridge or something.
Actually,
But
the
it
real
really
life
should
term
be
is worth
part of
$1.2
it.
million. It's already there.
We need a light, we need another light there. There are 2 places where it could
They
go.
were talking about moving a light down there.
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, that observation is pretty correct. I'm a resident in that area, and I got to tell you, traveling on north of Tudor on Elmore on the west side of the road is impossible because no sidewalk exists. However, that portion of Elmore is state DOT owned and controlled, and so improvements to that road are a little bit outside of our control. But as the demographics of that site location change, it obviously becomes a lot more important from DOT's perspective to ensure safety and look at those pedestrian-based and bicycle-based amenities and how to install them. The other thing to think about is that not everyone, especially year-round, will be walking between the campuses, say. And so, without stealing too much of a bull's thunder, I know that he's in regular conversations with the University of Alaska system about how we can keep circulation flowing using the Seawolf, what's the bus called? Seawolf, yeah.
I've got one more.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on that. I know when we had the public meeting at the permit center, I believe there was someone from state DOT there, right? And we were all talking about, and I know that our University Community Council also is in favor of having another signal on Tudor somewhere along that stretch. How open has state DOT been to that, and what would the time frame be for installing a new signal if they were to do it?
Yeah, through the chairman, Mr. Dunbar, I believe the crossing is that DOT has been a part of the discussion, and DOT has suggested it would be at Dale Street.
It would be either at Dale or the current entrance just east of Dale. One of
there are
those
2
two.
pretty logical places that I can think of. And I mean, right now, we've also got a major issue with entrance and egress from that neighborhood to the north, and from that to the that complex. It's very difficult to turn and head east out of that complex.
Right.
And so this is, if we could get a good signal there, this would hopefully help cure that as well. But again, what is State DOT told you about the cost or the realistic nature of that going forward?
I don't, through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, I don't believe they've talked about cost at this point, unless you know anything different. But certainly, one of the things that they've talked about is the need for that light as development happens on that site, because their transportation network has to respond to the surrounding area. And so as this process unfolds and as construction starts, I have a feeling that DOT will want to have those conversations sooner rather than later. There's 3 key transportation concerns that we have, and we control 2 of them. One is this crossing across Tudor, and that's not controlled by us, that's State DOT. Second is transportation infrastructure within or around the campus, and what we're looking at is known as a ring road. It'd be a way to provide adequate vehicular access around the perimeter of the site without having to put cars through the site or into the site. And then lastly, there's a need for a long-term connection at 46, which would be sort of at the midpoint of the campus, but is actually the back of the residential district to the west. It'll give much needed connectivity to the next light down, which would be Piper.
What's the problem there? But Robin and I were actually speaking with a man who lives there. There's apparently it's very narrow, so we probably have to buy up some of those houses. So that we would drive up the cost pretty significantly.
You take 26 down, you'd have to.
If we tried to punch through there, right?
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Dunbar. Yeah, there needs to be obviously a really big acquisition right out of the gate, which would be the Tozer Track property before you can even connect to it. Along the way, connecting that right away, there have to be other purchases.
We have 3 minutes. I got one somebody calling for the question. I've got a comment.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead, Chris.
John and I were just talking, and I think that I would ask for Mr. Schutte and listeners on to help us develop a project for this traffic and transportation question to the MTP through AMATS, because we're in that process right now, and we can get the best advice and the resources starting to drive.
Thank you.
I appreciate this project coming because I see no state money coming to Anchorage for any development, given their problems. This will be a wonderful boost to this part of my Summit district, so thank you very much. One thing you're missing, though, I need a movie theater put in. Sorry. When I look at the campus there, we got all those students over there in student housing, well, they have no entertainment at all, other than reading their school books. Being a professor there on occasion, I understand how that is. But put a movie theater of some kind there in your complex, and that we'll have students coming over there. They'll get food and they'll watch movies.
We'll be happy to take a look at that. Let me just say, Mr. Chair, that my partner Dave and I are honored to be here and honored to do the project. So we look very much forward to working with all of you.
We look forward to working with you because it's a wonderful development for our product. So thank you very much. It just means over.